Okay, so good morning everyone. I'm Chandani Verma from School of Language, Literature and Culture Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to the session B5. And we are delighted to have such a distinguished gathering of scholars, researchers, and enthusiasts with us today. I'm confident that this session will bring forth stimulating discussions and valuable insights. To chair this session, we are honored to have Professor Sanjay Verma. He's an associate professor in the Department of English at the University of Delhi. With his vast expertise and deep understanding of the field, we look forward to an engaging and thought-provoking session under his guidance. We have scholars such as enthusiasts from all over the world. Now, I would like to ask the speaker to present this sessions, and please, time limit is 15 minutes. Please keep in mind. Okay. Now I invite Dr. Anne Hardgrove. She is an associate professor of history at the University of Texas at San Antonio, USA. Dr. Anne?
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Just trying to do the slideshow from the beginning. There we go. All right. So the name of my presentation today is Decolonizing or Recolonizing the Kama Sutra. And I'm going to be talking about the first legal publication of the Kama Sutra in the United Kingdom. I am presenting from Texas and down in the southern part of the United States. And my previous work as a historian has been on the Marwari community of Kolkata. And so this paper is a project that is more literary than ethnographic for me. So what I'm going to be talking about today is how the original Kama Sutra was a palm leaf manuscript, and it was assembled by the sage Vātsyāyana in the city of Pataliputra in the 3rd century CE. So this city, now known as Patna in the state of Bihar, although I understand there's some discussion about whether to change the name, has held a very important place in the history of Indian religions and figures prominently and somewhat ironically in the story that I'm presenting today. So as you know, Patna is situated along the Ganges River in northern India and has been a very prominent city in Mauryan and Gupta times to the present. And it's one of the places in South Asia that's been continuously settled since about the 6th century BC. So as other scholars have documented, Vātsyāyana was commissioned to produce a Sanskrit manuscript, which was a compendium of ancient wisdom regarding the life of pleasure, including sexual pleasure. Recent research by Sanskrit specialists suggests that a troupe of female courtesans commissioned the manuscript, and that it may have been once in the form of a theatrical drama to be publicly performed. And this was a very important manuscript in the corpus of Sanskrit literature. But what concerns me today is less about these ancient antecedents of the Kama Sutra. Instead, I wish to talk about the first legal publication of the Kama Sutra in English in the United Kingdom in the mid-20th century. So as is well known, the Victorian explorer Richard Burton had put his name on an English translation made by Bhagwanwal Indraji and his associate Bide, who were both Sanskrit scholars at Bombay University. So this edition was of Richard Burton, and he was a captain in the British Army, and his global explorations made him a pretty controversial authority on world sexuality. However, this 1880s edition of the Kama Sutra was printed privately and was not widely available. After the relaxation of British censorship laws in the early 1960s, the time seemed ripe for a new, widely circulated and profitable publication of the Kama Sutra into English. So the person I'm going to be talking about today is Bill Archer. He's known as William George Archer or W.G. Archer, Bill among his friends. He worked with London publisher Allen and Unwin on the edition of the Kama Sutra. And from the outside, Archer would seem to be a natural choice of a scholar to author an introduction and serve as a general editor of reprinting Burton's edition of the Kama Sutra. He had lived in India for almost 2 decades, where he was part of the British colonial administration, and he earned a reputation as a leading collector and scholar of Indian art and architecture, particularly among the Santal tribal peoples of Bihar. Archer had authored many books on painting, folklore, folk songs, and folk art, and was clearly a knowledgeable admirer of and expert on these aspects of Indian culture. After he finished his work as a colonial official after independence, he was appointed to be what's called the keeper, the head of the India section at London's Victoria and Albert Museum, which cemented his expertise as authority on Indian art and architecture. But there was another considerably darker chapter of Archer's background. As district magistrate of Patna during Mahatma Gandhi's, just trying to go forward, Quit India movement of 1942, Archer was in charge of the British military police. A large crowd had gathered outside the Patna Secretariat in peaceful protests, and something like 6,000 people. And 7 unarmed young men hoped to hoist India's national flag to the top of the Patna Secretariat. Local police refused to shoot the students as Archer ordered them to. So Archer brought in Gurkha soldiers who, upon his orders, shot these 7 soldiers to death. There does not appear to be any evidence that Archer reached out to family members or ever apologized for his actions for that day. And as you see in this sculpture, as the flag was passed from one student to the next, each young man was shot to death under Archer's orders. So ultimately, after this happened in 42, Archer stayed in India till 1948, serving in the Naga Hills in the region of Assam between India and Myanmar. So this sculpture came about because India's first president, Rajendra Prasad, was interested in helping immortalize the tragic events of August 11th, 1942. He commissioned this Shahid Samarak, Martyrs Memorial, to depict the students clad in their dhoti and kurtas. The foundation stone of the moving sculpture was laid on August 15th, 1947, very significant date. Sculptor Devi Prasad Ray Chowdhury designed the memorial with the statues cast in bronze in Italy before being brought to Patna around 1957. And I've not yet come across in my research any of Archer's response to the memorial, but its very existence had to be a very tough reminder of the brutal killings that took place under his watch and command. So in terms of the publication of this Kama Sutra, the plan to publish it was legally complex. And there were censorship laws meant that publishers could be criminally charged for obscenity. And Rainer Unwin of the publishing giant Allen and Unwin took hold of the project. Rainer had from childhood been part of the family firm of George Allen and Unwin, so that was his father. And Rainer, in addition to publishing the Kama Sutra, he had pushed his parents' company to publish Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, as well as the first UK publications of Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach, along with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So, in seeking to publish the Kama Sutra, Rayner sought out not one, but two legal opinions on the process of preparing the Kama Sutra manuscript for publication. And what they had to get around was that an item had to be judged in its entirety as a whole, and the extent to which it could potentially deprave or corrupt an innocent person, such as a minor. And if a work could be broken down into constituent parts, any smaller part of the work could potentially be removed. In terms of the book jacket and the book price were all to be examined as closely as possible in light of Section 4.2 of the law, which takes into consideration experts' opinions of literary, artistic, scientific, and other merit. So what their attorney advised them to do was to seek the opinions of a few distinguished experts to weigh in on the cultural and historical significance of the book. So Unwin was aware that K.M. Panikkar, who you can see on the slide, who wrote the introduction, that he had already written this for another press, Thames and Hudson, and they had planned but decided against publishing the Kama Sutra a few years earlier. And what their plan was to publish parts of it in Latin, which had been the standard way of publishing things that would otherwise be deemed obscene. So they were particularly worried about a rival Kama Sutra being published in the United States, which came out. They wanted to be the first and make as a moneymaker. And they also worried about other rumored publications coming out of Columbia. So in just wrapping up, so how do we make sense of Archer the Butcher, as he became known in the aftermath of the murders, with sort of Archer the hipster? An art critic and 20th century Richard Burton, bringing the Kama Sutra to an English-speaking public. And looking at some correspondence of W.G. Archer with the publishers gives us some clues as to how the project was conceptuated and also Panikkar's role in it. And one thing that was difficult to read in the research was how dismissive both Archer and Unwin were of Panikkar's contribution, dismissing it as useful nonsense, just with the goal of warding off adverse critics or even public prosecutors. So I'd like to say that, rather than considering 1942 as an anomaly in Archer's overall legacy, his role as what he was called Archer the Butcher, as he's known in Bihar, helps conceptualize a man whose work tended to romanticize tribal Santal folk art and ancient India at the expense of contemporary, politically active caste Hindus. Perhaps like Burton himself, who brought the Kama Sutra to English readers, Archer to recolonize the Kama Sutra in his own times. Thank you. I'll just stop sharing.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have Miss Anna D'Angelo.
Hello, good night here in Argentina. Good morning for you in India. Well, are you listening to me? It's okay?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, we
okay.
can hear.
Okay, thank you. I will talk tonight about yoga in Argentina and trying to show some keys to analyze its local reinterpretation. I am from the University of Mar del Plata, Argentina. It's a city in the coast in the Atlantic. To start with, I would like to tell you how I was started to think about this process of yoga in Argentina. Obviously, first thinking of it's the process of globalization, taking it into account that it is a complex transnational phenomenon in which good information and people circulate. All the images in this presentation are taken for me. The first one is, as you can see, Ravi Shankar in a visit to Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina, in 12 years ago. This investigation is part of my PhD research that took place from 2009 until 2014. This visit was during that period, and the other one is a picture of one of massive meditation that were invited by precisely this organization, The Art of Living, and how media representate them, like creating peace or calling for peace by means of massive meditation. These people are of the village where I lived, in Mar del Plata, as I told you, and I was considering many ways of practicing yoga. One of them is a meditation, massive meditation near the beach, and the other one is previously for a practice of surf, as you can see. So there are many yogas in this massive scale of practice. And I use yoga with the capital letter to refer to the philosophy and the end that yoga pursues, that is the quest for divinity, and yoga in plural and with lowercase to refer to all these large-scale yoga practices. I've done a multi-sited ethnographic research in different groups, and I observed different practices. Some of them, as you saw recently, just saw a massive in the street, and others that were more private. Some of practice such as Hatha yoga or Vinyasa yoga or Ashtanga yoga. So one question that appears is the difference or this classification that many scholars or some scholars found around what they call modern yoga. They classify them in styles of yoga that are more physical or other that are more devotional. I found that for the practitioners, this classification is not so clear, and it follows a dichotomy about body and mind and spirit. Instead of that, I found that these different purposes or ways of practicing yogas were in connection one to the other. For some people, what a scholar may call physical practice, because they are centered in asanas, could look for a devotional or therapeutical end. So following the pardon. Following some scholars that look for keys of interpretation for different socio-religious movements, I will focus on these three processes of yoga insertion in Argentina. One, as a form of spirituality that is not opposed to Catholicism, which is the principal or the official religion in Argentina. I will move this so that you can see that. This picture was taken precisely in that event of Ravi Shankar visit to Argentina, but I've chosen for this key because this woman has here the word God in Spanish. I must say that pioneers of yoga were Europeans who lived in India and later migrated to Argentina, such as Swami Sivananda or Swami Kapilananda. And the first integration of yoga in Argentina was in a heterodox and peripheral field in terms of religion and modernity. Later, in the 60s, there was a Jesuit priest, Ismael Quiles, who founded a School of Oriental Studies in a university, the University of Salvador. And indeed, in that context, he provided the philosophical legitimation of Hatha Yoga, justifying its practice from a Christian perspective, arguing that it had historically been practiced by various philosophical and religious traditions in the East. By the 70s, yoga was gaining increasing visibility. Various swamis visited Argentina, such as Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who introduced his technique of transcendental meditation with pragmatic and secular aims, targeting an elite audience engaged in business. During the 80s, yoga underwent a rapid process of institutionalization in Argentina, with different movements, associations, schools, and Congress, and even magazines. The professionalization of the discipline was in strictly secular terms, what helped its insertion in Argentina. In fact, during the 90s, yoga groups were socially stigmatized and considered sect opposed to Catholicism. It means that yoga found its place early within a peripheral field of beliefs, then after that for the New Age movement, but always in some tension of Catholicism, with Catholicism. When it was transmitted in esoterical or religious terms, it was stigmatized. It was its pragmatic and secular orientation that facilitated its popularization. The second key is of yoga as a practice, as a therapeutic practice in the field of health. In this image, we can see a doctor, a biomedical doctor, who is an Hare Krishna, and he's taking a class to people interested in his medicine, especially in Ayurveda. This is an example here in this city, only an example of how yoga and Ayurveda were considering intention, in this case, with biomedicine. The first way in which the process that allowed that this could happen, it was started by Krishnamacharya disciples such as Iyengar, who said that the effect of the practice of yoga were compatible with biomedical sciences. In Argentina, it was Matashi Indra Devi who expresses that it has, instead of a religion, it was a method for physical, mental, and spiritual development. Well, there's all a tension, as I said, between yoga and biomedicine, as if it is considered a medical, an alternative or a complementary technique or not. It was especially with psychotherapy that yoga inserted in the field of health in Argentina. Because of these keys that I wrote here, the concern of emotional suffering, the interest in the body that psychotherapists had, a notion of holism for health, and the adaptation of the notion of energy also, with some body therapies that based on energy. And the third and last one is a promotion, yoga promoted for women well-being. As in other places of the world, it was aimed for women aligned with traditional responsibilities of care and health, while also enabling feelings of freedom and autonomy. And this was also reinforced by the rise of fitness that happened all over the world, with some books such as Yoga for Women, or the one of Iyengar Geta, Geta Iyengar, the daughter of the guru. In my fieldwork, I found that many women started practicing yoga when they had to care their child during their motherhood. They needed mental and emotional stability, and this aim coped with body fitness also, when they didn't have many time to practice and they needed to do something for them. So yoga was a good way of self-caring while child rearing. And also yoga, as in other parts of the world, was oriented to lifestyle in a consumption society. This image also of my city shows very clearly how this is sold, and well, the image of the girl I think represents what I am trying to say. To finish with, I found to synthesize some ways in which yoga adapted the framework from which it belongs to, for example, a psychotherapist, reaching the reference to particular problems such as emotional suffering or the interest in the body. Yoga framework has also been expanding its public thanks to a holistic notion of well-being and of health that also medicine is starting to acquire. Many yoga practitioners concerned for body fitness have compelled to extend framework purposes in order to include them. And some values or beliefs of yoga, which were contrary to lifestyle in which in a consumer society, have been also transformed for this adaptation. Well, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I invite Mr. Yatan Sharma from Newark.
Hi, I'd like to share my screen. Just a sec. Is my screen visible to all? Hopefully, yes. Yeah.
Yes, yes, it is visible.
Okay. So, yeah, just a sec. Hi, everyone. So, I'd like to present my paper titled "Revitalizing Self-Reliance in the Era of Globalization." So, here's the outline of my presentation. So, first, I'll discuss why this context and why at this time. After that, I'll try to unwind the ambiguous term of self-reliance and its various objectives. And after that, I'll try to explain India's revitalized version of reliance reliance in the name of Atmanirbhar Bharat. And following that, we'll try to see what are the various political and economic objectives that have infused the India to revitalize this path. And in the second last section, I'll try to unwind some of the critiques based on India's A and B approach. And lastly, I'll try to address a so what question. So of this literature. So to start, why self reliance and why at this point of time? So basically, the concept of self-reliance was often associated with the socialist approach in the pre-Cold War era. In the post-Cold War era. So it was often associated with tools like import substitution and protectionist economic measures. However, with the end of Cold War, the entire world entangled themselves into the complex web of interdependence, and thus the concept of self-reliance was assumed to be a relic of the past. But however, with the profound implications of socio-political and economic impacts of COVID-19 pandemic has compelled states to revitalize this concept and to look inwards, that is to take care of their own people at first place instead of catering to the entire world. So countries became more vocal and active in their approaches, and and they were also employing the local available resources to first serve their own community at the first place. Critics have often said that India's approach to A and B is just a kind of political rhetoric, because it's not possible for a country to achieve self-reliance, especially by inviting FDIs and FIIs. In this paper, I'd like to argue that this new version of self-reliance which India has adopted is not about isolationism, about nor it's something which is like completely antithetical to the contemporary, or say the essence of self-reliance. Unlike the previous Cold War era approaches to the self-reliance, which often emphasized on import substitution and state control, the contemporary version of self-reliance is more open and is about more integration of our economy with the rest of the world. So basically, it's not about isolationism, rather it's about re-globalization of the entire world. So I have I have used the following data in this research process tracing to trace the chain of events that led to the implementation of Atmanirbhar Bharat, archival research to trace the changes in the production process of various industries, and to analyze the speeches and documents presented by the state to and states to testify the objectives of this mission. Discourse analysis. I have analyzed various speeches given by administrators and politicians, and lastly, data analysis of information that I have fetched about India's import export thing. So the key finding and argument of my whole paper is that self-reliance is a policy which is feasible even in this globalized era. And secondly, it's not appropriate to equate self-reliance with the concept of isolationism or protectionism. Rather, it's about re-globalization of the entire world instead of simply the disintegration from the international economy. So how I reached that conclusion? So let's start with unwinding the ambiguous or same multidimensional term of self-reliance. If we look at the concept of self-reliance, there is hardly any kind of consensus among the scholars regarding its precise definition or say objectives. So if we talk about the origin or contextualization of this term in Indian political thought, there are n number of scholars who have discussed the concept, ranging from medieval time of Chanakya to the modern time of the Tupan Thengri. So all of them have discussed the concept. So basically, just for a layman, the concept of self-reliance is all about producing everything within the country from a small pin to a spaceship, but it's not about that. It's about the effective and efficient employment of locally available resources and to reduce excessive economic dependence on external players. If we look at all these mentioned scholars, we can find that there are significant differences in their approaches and subjects as well. For instance, Gandhi, Vivekanand, and Chanakya, they restricted their conceptualization of self reliance to individuals only. They were more focused for an individual to become self-reliant, while on the other hand, Deen Dayal Upadhyaya and Dattopant Thengri, they were more focused in terms of state to become self-reliant. Similarly, there are significant differences among all these scholars regarding the means on how to achieve self-reliance. For instance, Gandhi was focused on developing the agrarian sector, while on the other hand, Jawaharlal Nehru was focused on developing the industrialized sector to achieve self reliance, while Upadhyay was focused on collective well-being and socio-economic empowerment of individuals, and Dattopan Thengri was primarily focused on import reduction. After analyzing the definitions of all these scholars from various perspectives, the conclusion that comes out of this kind of literature review is that when a country aims to become self-reliant, it basically tries to achieve two things. First, the balance between economic interdependence and political independence, where a country A, who is excessively dependent economically on country B, so in that case, country B should not be able to intervene in the political independence of country A. And second, to ensure effective and efficient employment of locally available resources instead of simply importing the goods that can be produced domestically with the appropriate employment of resources. After having understanding of the concept and objectives of self-reliance in which I have used in this particular paper, let's try to understand what Atmanirbhar Bharat is all about. Though, though though the existing government has used the term for the first time in 2014 in reference to the start of manufacturing of some maybe of some small equipment, defense equipment, the idea was not presented as an umbrella policy until 2020. So the prime objective of this whole umbrella policy is to empower individual and maximizing their potential to ensure the effective employment of resources, which include which with the emphasis on individual, like for instance, human capital. Unlike the previous version of self-reliance, which was most prominent in 1960s, the existing government was not primarily focused on import substitution. Rather, it was trying to boost boost the domestic production by ensuring the effective employment of resources, and to ensure that effective employment, if we have to import certain goods some from outside, that's okay with the existing regime. So it's not basically about hardcore isolationism. And what the existing government mean by the re-globalization, which they are trying to achieve from self-reliance, or say Atmanirbhar Bharat, it's not just for India, it's for the entire world, which they are claiming. First, they want to diversify the global supply chain. That is for, they want other countries as well to diversify their global supply chains. For instance, countries in the African continent, so that they can maintain a fine balance between their political independence and economic interdependence. And secondly, to ensure effective employment of resources. Import reduction and export promotion are not the first, or say the fundamental objectives of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Rather, they are the cascading outcomes of this policy. It's an umbrella policy under which various programs like new education policy, Skill India initiative, Startup India, and financial incentives to MSMEs, etc., have been launched to realize the aforementioned objectives. So, what are the motivations behind the launch of this initiative? So, I have classified motivation into two parts: political and economic. Let's first talk about political motivations, which is primarily focused on China. It has been seen that from the very long time, China has been leveraging on India's excessive economic dependence on it, and constantly trying to change the status quo at the LAC. So Chinese imports ranging from small Diwali lights to semiconductor chip used in almost every advanced machine. China has remained India's largest import partner for years. For instance, in 2017 and 18, China imports accounted for 16.4% of India's total imports, followed by 14% in 2018 and 19, and rising again to 16.53 in 2021. And secondly, inability of the government to overcome, or say to find an alternative to excessive reliance on China has posed a significant security threat to India. Thus, it was essential for the government to come up with something that at least promises to address these challenges, if not in short term, or say rather with the immediate outcome. The other motivation was economic factors that have affected increasing economic dependence imports from China. Unemployment rate in India was around 7% in the pre-COVID era, and it rose to 10% in the post-COVID era. Make in India wasn't enough successful in terms of both creating jobs and reducing dependence on imports. Thus, all these economic challenges exacerbated during the COVID, and thus government was compelled to come up with something which addresses both these issues. So often, Western scholars have criticized India's A and B initiative just as merely as a part of a political rhetoric. So is it just a political rhetoric, or is there something in essence? So the first challenge to Atmanirbhar Bharat not come from outside, rather it comes from inside. The Union Minister of State for Commerce and Industry, Anupriya Patel, in July 2020, informed the Lok Sabha that India's import from China has increased by nearly 29% in the past 5 years. So what does it mean? It means that India, so it appears that A and B is just a political rhetoric. But if we look at the components that we have imported, or say the quality, or say the area where imports have increased, we can find that imports have been predominantly increased by the influx of capital and intermediate goods instead of final consumer goods and raw material. India's manufacture and and some other reasons for increase in imports is that India's manufacture sector is extensively dependent on China, thus switching instantly from one country to another was unfeasible. India has also introduced the PLI scheme under the umbrella of A and B that provide incentives for smartphone manufacturing companies to produce in India. India's recent so inter so recently India earlier used to be 80% import dependent for KSM and APIs, which are a pharmaceutical components. However, this number has fallen to 60% in 2023. And in terms of automobile sector, PLI has also played a significant role in reducing imports and bringing in investments. So situating the whole idea of A and B in the scholarship of IPE. Yeah. So whether David Lake or Thomas Oatley, various IP scholars have talked about the role of domestic interest in shaping countries' economic policies. So if we look at countries like the US and some countries of the EU, they are also trying to reduce its dependence on one country, which is China, with the aim of diversifying its global supply chain. Although this paper extensively focused on the Indian case, it has a wider political and economic implications. As we can see, all these countries nowadays are trying to maintain a fine balance between their excessive economic interdependence and political independence, and simultaneously trying to employ the available resources effectively and efficiently. Lastly, conclusion. Uh, So the key advantage of this approach just is not just about the diversification of the supply chain, rather it's about the re-globalization of the entire world, which will provide the world an alternative to the existing economically dominant nation, but also allow them to sustain their political integrity. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I invite Dr. Mariana Barruco.
Good morning for you in India. Good evening for us here in America. Can you listen to me?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
I am Professor Dr. Mariana Barruco Machado Andraus. I am Associate Professor in the Dance Department of State University of Campinas. And my presentation has two parts. In the first one, I will try to show a piece of a video dance in which I dance an improvisation inspired in a piece of a choreography called Dashavatar. It's from Odissi dance. And in the second part of my presentation, I will make a dramatic reading of a text, a poetic text that I wrote to the event. Maybe you can't listen to the audio from the video, so if you are not able to listen, we will just watch a little bit and then I will go to the second part. Can you see?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Going there, coming out, crossing, beat, going, breathing, drawing, dying, holding, trembling, pushing, crossing, jumping, showing, hiding, dying, living, coloring, flying, swimming, living, going there, coming out, crossing, beating, pushing, opening, going, breathing, pushing, drawing, dying, holding, trembling, pushing, waiting, pulling, going, crossing, jumping, comes out, crossing, showing, beating, hiding, going, dying, breathing, living, drawing, dying, coloring, holding, trembling, flying, pushing, swimming, pushing, crossing, jumping, showing, closing, hiding, dying, opening, living, hating, loving, waiting, going there, coming out.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
This work is entitled Immersion in Odissi Dance. A Brazilian dancer dips her feet in the Yamuna River with the heart of an Indian dancer, dipping her feet in the Atibaia River. I am Dr. Mariana Barruco Machado Andraus, Associate Professor in the Dance Department of State University of Campinas. Good morning to you all. It's still night here in Brazil, and we are still on March 3rd. It's 11 p.m. here. We Brazilians are eternally behind you in relation to the conventional timekeeping of Western culture. The sun rises in the east and Asian countries greet it first. And we all know that this will not change. We also know that the sun does not rise, but we, planetary beings on the earth, revolve around our own planet, and this gives us the sensation of time passing. Day and night, light and dark. The planet revolves around itself, around the sun, and we are gathered here to talk about the knowledge traditions of Bharat. Me, a Brazilian aspiring to be an Odissi dancer, proposing a presentation about Odissi dance, Brazilian dance, and two rivers, Yamuna and Atibaia, as a metaphor. I wrote to this event a poetic essay entitled Immersion in Odissi Dance, a Brazilian dancer dips her feet in the Yamuna River with the heart of an Indian dancer dipping her feet in the Atibaia River. Now I wondered that I was brave to try to write about the Yamuna River. I have never been near it. I have not yet appreciated its banks and course, and I do not know the geography of India to know if it's further north or further south. But I know the Atibaia River very well. I have been drinking from its waters since I was born. So, as millions of citizens of Campinas, I am this river. I begin the text by commenting on the connections that exist on my own name. Like all Brazilians, I am the result of a mix of Portuguese immigrants, also Italian immigrants in my case, where the name Barruco of Hebrew origin comes from, Afro-diasporic immigrants, and indigenous ancestors who lived here before the 16th century, when Portugal invaded and occupied Brazil in search of India. I have no doubt that this brings me at least a little closer to you. My name, however, has many more confusions. Axe, for example. It's a tool used by lumberjacks to cut down trees. Cutting down trees and clearing them is the first thing a nomadic group of gatherers does when, deep in the forest, they find a clearing they intend to temporarily inhabit. That is not how this name came to be, however. Between the 15th and 16th centuries, non-Christian people who lived in Europe were forcibly converted to the Catholic religion. And in the process of being baptized in the adulthood, they were given new names to help them leave the past behind. These names were generally the names of trees, animals, or objects. In other words, there are traditional Portuguese names, such as Bourbon, one of the names of the Portuguese royal family that ruled in Brazil between 16th and 19th centuries, but the vast majority of Portuguese people in Brazil have names like mine. I take, for example, my paternal grandparents, Urbano Machado Silveira and Eduarda Lima Pereira. Not just one, but 4 names of converted Christians, Machado, Silveira, Lima, and Pereira, 1 axe and 3 trees. Between Barruco and Machado, in my name, I glimpse the Gaza region itself. And Andraus was a name I chose, an Arabic name with Greek origins taken from my first husband. I thought it would be interesting to start the text with this whole soap opera about the name, because I was applying to participate in the panel Decolonial Perspectives Challenge Western Knowledge Hegemony, Recognizing Indigenous Epistemologies. And my name is very, very decolonial indeed. In the text, I continue to report the paths that led me as a dance researcher to an interest in Chinese martial arts, which I practiced exhaustively for 15 years, and later Indian dance, which I have practiced exhaustively for 13 years. The text is poetic, cartographic, and decolonial. In it, I joke about the Yamuna and the Tibaya River in dialogue, a metaphor for the epistemological bridge in dance that I seek to weave in my research activities. I report on the partnership that I began to establish in 2020 with Professor Dr. K.R. Rajahavi Verma, professor at the Pondicherry University in India, quoting the channel on YouTube where the 29 videos we produced during the pandemic are published. This is the channel. I can put the link in the chat after. We also published 2 books that are collections of texts written by the group's researchers about the videos. Intercultural Performance Studies, this one, and Intercultural Studies in Performing Arts, the other one. In the text, I also thank Guru Sripadvana Maharaja for having recently initiated me, from which came my other name that I quote in the text, Mana Mohini. And I also thank my Odissi teacher, Andrea Itacarambi Albergaria, considered one of the greatest experts in Odissi dance in Brazil, and to whom I owe all my immersion in this wonderful river that is Odissi dance. Thank you all very much. And I forgot to write, but Atibaia is an indigenous word. Itacarambi is an indigenous word. And many words here in Portuguese in Brazil are have this origin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have Dr. Matheus Landau de Carvalho.
Can you all hear me? Hello?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Miss or Mrs. Verma, I don't know how, I don't know how to treat you, Mr. Verma. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night for everybody. Thank you for being here. And it's a pleasure to share this moment with you all. Okay. And now I'm going to share with you some first impressions I had by doing my PhD research concerning Dharma in Valmiki's Ramayana. Okay. First of all, it's just a first approach. Okay. I study in its beginning without going through any of the darshanas. Okay. And the study is concerned with this question here. Is it possible to find a concept in Sanskrit language and Hindu culture equivalent to what is understood in Western European linguistic cultural matrices as nature? I'm part of a group of studies here at the university. I'm part of the Federal University of Juiz de Fora, and it's a group of studies comprising many religions according to the focus of religion and nature. Okay, and in this group we have Judaism and nature, Christianity and nature, Buddhism and nature, and Hindu traditions and nature as well. Okay, and people, the aim here is not to reduce Sanskrit categories with their own semantics to original European cultural paradigms, but to visualize semantic resonances that point out to coincidences between the two immense areas of knowledge. Okay, so according to some definitions we can have from modern European language, nature can be a set of laws presiding over the existence of things and the succession of beings, comprising all those natural elements and forms of life that may dispense with human calculation or intervention to exist as such. I don't mean here that they are completely isolated from each other, but of course they have some interaction, but before everything, they can do without human calculation or intervention to exist as such, okay? Whether in the animal, the vegetable, or the mineral expressions of life. Or it can be also an active force that sets and preserves the given natural order, noticeable through human sensory perception of all that exists. Another point, nature can be the totality of created things, such as the universe, the cosmos, or matter per se. What constitutes a being in general, the essence or sui generis characteristic of this or that manifestation of concrete or abstract life, or even the framework of features, habits, and functions that are inherited, or even the character, the specific inclination, or the temperament of someone or something, okay? I'd like to make one point clear here that the focus is not the existential search of the Hindu follower based on dharmic praxeologies. Okay, I'm not going to focus on the believer, him or herself. Okay, I'm going to focus my analysis here on nature, or at least what we might infer as being nature according to the search the origin, the text I'm taking here, the Valmiki's Ramayana, and the concepts, okay? Sanskrit terms which might be equivalent to various semantic nuances inherent to nature are here. Nature can be Srishti, Jagat, Bhumandalan, Vishwan, Brahmandan, Sarga, Marga, Riti, Ma, Vidhi, Niyama, Dharma, Sushtikrama, Prakriti, Maya, Adishakti, Nirmatri, Devata, Pradana, Prakara, Swarupa, Swabhava, Nisarga, Tatwan, Satwan, Guna, Shilan, among others, okay? But beyond this inventory of words and meanings that might fit what we may call as nature in our language, there is something else by reading, according to my point of view, Valmiki's Ramayana, okay? And what's the central issue of Valmiki's Ramayana? It's Hindu Dharma. And I'm going to call Hindu Dharma because we may have the Buddha Dharma, okay? I'm not going to approach here Buddha Dharma. I'm going to approach here Hindu Dharma in general, okay? Dharma comes from Sanskrit, from the verbal root dhr, which means support, sustain, to keep in balance. In other words, the correct way to maintain order and balance in the universe, the cosmos, matter in general. As long as each element in the cosmos behaves in accordance with its dharma, balance as a whole is maintained. Since each element in the cosmos deviates in some way from its dharma, it entails a certain adharma and disturbs the balance as a whole, substantially in the three dimensions, precious for us here, Trilokya, inhabited by the Hindu deities, the devas. And by looking at these scenarios, people, we can have the Hindu cosmic arrangement of the three dimensions, the Trilokya, which is which is made up with the sky or heaven, which is Swar in Sanskrit, atmosphere or sometimes the mid-air, which is called Bhuvas in Sanskrit, and the Bhur, which is the earth. And from Ramayana itself, we can see some excerpts like these ones here. Deprived of the cries of Swadha and Vashat, devoid of all ritual performance, Nishkriyam, and indeed stripped of all Dharma practiced through the wrath of Vayu, the triple world, that is Trilokya, seemed to be in hell. And if Dharma were undermined, the entire triple world, Trilokya, together with its fixed and moving contents, it reminds Bhimanu Smriti, what moves and what moves not, in its cosmogony, as well as the horses of Devas and Rishis, would be destroyed without a doubt. Important philosophical background for understanding the soteriological dynamics of Hindu Dharma according to Hindu cosmic arrangement of Trilokya is the set of words made up with Daiva, Kritanta, Satya, and Rita. And what does it have to do with our approach here? Dispense, because they can dispense with any calculation or human initiative, purushakara, or free will, kamakara, to exist as such. And again, I don't mean that there is no relation, that there is no reciprocity between human existence and these aspects of existence, but at some extent they can do without human existence. Okay, and besides that, they determine the ontological dynamics linked to the doctrines of karma and samsara. In the context of palace intrigue, Ayodhya Kanda places in Lakshmana's mouth all confidence in the calculation of Kamakara, Purushakara, to reverse the circumstances that led to Rama's exile. Again from Ramayana, you are a bull among Kshatriyas, as powerful as Daiva is powerless. How in the world can you blame Daiva, a contemptible, feeble thing? For it is only the weak and cowardly who submit to Daiva. Heroic men, strong of heart, do not humble themselves before Daiva. A man able to counter Daiva with manly effort does not give up for all that Daiva may frustrate his purpose. Sorry. However, what stands out in Ayodhya Kanda is an indisputable subliminal confidence in the organic arrangement behind the apparent and immediate vicissitudes to human perception, even if contrary to the Kamakara or Purushakara of the human being, in its turn, too circumstantial to account for a supposed latent and infallible mechanism of retributive justice or reciprocity, if you prefer, for transgressions previously committed by anyone, such as a sovereign universal equation closely identical to the guidelines of what we understand as nature. Valmiki's Ramayana makes it very clear through some excerpts in which Rama opposes Lakshmana's aforementioned reasoning and reinforces his conviction in an orderly logic of effects similar to the Hindu doctrine of karma. It is nothing but Kritanta Saumitri that we must see at work in my exile and in the revocation of the kingship, which had been awarded to me. For why should Kaikeyi be so determined to harm me, were this intention of hers not Daiva and ordained by Kritanta? What cannot be explained must surely be Daiva, which clearly no creature can resist. Pay attention, which clearly no creature can resist. What man has the power to contest his Daiva Saumitri, when one cannot even perceive it except from its effect? Sukha, and Duhuka, Bhaya and Krodha, Labha and Alabha, Bhava and Abhava. All things such as these must surely be the effects of Daiva. No one acts of his own Kamakara. Man is not independent. This way and that he is pulled along by Kritanta. There is a certain expectation that Hindu Dharma will establish itself as a certain truthful principle, perceived by the human mind of the Hindu follower, exactly as a cosmic axiom imbued with an unequivocal and concrete reciprocity of processes determined by an absolutely sovereign and irrevocable causality, similar to what is generally understood as satya in itself, especially in the confessional and ethical fields of human action. This same absolute sovereignty and irrevocability of Satya, combined with Hindu Dharma over the relativity of human calculations and wills, based on their unequivocal and concrete reciprocities, constitute realities that closely coincide with everything that can do without human initiative or intervention to exist as such, as an active force that establishes and preserves the natural given order, everything that exists, the totality of created things, that is, nature to kur. For people who understand the meaning of Dharma, hold Satya to be its essence. Now I am simply appealing to Satya and exhorting you to do what is according to Dharma. Dharma is paramount in the world, and on Dharma is Satya founded. This command of fathers, that is Dasharatha's, Rama's father, is based on Dharma and is absolute. Having once heard a father's command, a mother's or a brahmana's, one must not disregard it, my mighty brother, if one would hold to what is Dharma. That in which there are no elders is not an assembly. They who do not preach Dharma are not elders. That in which there is no Satya is not Dharma. That which is permeated by deception is not Satya. As from a serpent do people recoil from a man who speaks falsely, Anirta. We are about to see Rita very soon. Satya, it is said, is the ultimate form of Dharma in this world and the very root of a swarga, of heaven. As a very intimate synonym of Satya and antonym of Anirta, Rita holds as a possible common denominator of its polysemy something that guarantees proportional reciprocity between any cosmic elements involved in an interaction according to a dynamism irrevocably free of internal contradictions, as indefectible as invincible, whether in its most abstract philosophical meanings or in its empirical factual consummation. Thus, Hurtado denotes, in many contexts, precisely a harmonious, functional, and correct arrangement, presupposed of the same elements that form the cosmos, equivalent to what we understand nature in its broadest sense, and which, from the orthodox Vedic perspective, would be in line with the dynamics of the Hindu Dharma, and vice versa. Because they are exactly the emblem of their sabotage, the demons led by Ravana are known for the denial, in Sanskrit na, the prefix na, of this universal arrangement, rita, configuring themselves as disorderly promoters of chaos, nairita, saboteurs of the cosmos, demons of Adharma in Valmiki's Ramayana, due to the disruption they caused in the harmonious relations of Anordomundi in accordance with the guidelines of Hindu Dharma, regardless of the implications involved. Filled with delight, Indrajit, Ravana's son, Meghanada, victorious in battle, entered the citadel of Lanka to the delight of all the Rakshasas, promoters of chaos, that is, the Naitas. Releasing showers of arrows, their chariots making deep rumbling sounds, those bulls among Rakshasas, promoters of chaos, Nairita, charging, resembled storm clouds pouring torrents. Having addressed these words to his counselors, the lord of the Rakshasas then spoke to the Rakshasas, promoters of chaos, Nairita, who stood at their posts all around him. And here are my concluding remarks. Yes, my answer is yes. According to this brief presentation, I believe that it is possible to visualize the scenario of Trilokya as a totality such as the universe, the cosmos, or matter as semantically plausible synonyms of nature, of created things, whether in the animal, the vegetable, or the mineral expressions of life, in which several dynamics that constitute themselves as a set of laws presiding over the existence of things and the successions of beings, through the Sanskrit notions of Hindu Dharma, Satya, and Rita, comprising all those natural elements and forms of life that may dispense with human calculation or intervention to exist as such, generically symbolized by the Sanskrit notions of Purushakara and Kamakara, through the operative sovereignty of Daiva and Kritanta, as active forces that guarantee the preservation of the given natural order, noticeable through human sensory perception of all that exists. And here is the bibliography, and Dhanyavada, thank you very much, and that's all. Of course, that we might here go through many. Let me find here. Where are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I can't see you.
Yes, Chandni, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Professor Joy Slatoff. She's clinical professor of yoga studies and Sanskrit, Los Angeles.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. Let me just see if I can share my slides. Can you see them?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. Thank you. So today I'm going to be talking about collective karma, harnessing individual action for global well-being. And I'm going to start with this beautiful artwork done by a friend of mine, Melissa Townsend. It's an illustration of Yoga Sutra 434, the last of the Yoga Sutras. And I'm going to return to this image at the end, but just to kind of plant this seed of this rainbow of colors coming together in your mind. So I'll start by just defining karma. Karma comes from the root kre, meaning to do, make, prepare, create, engender, arrange. It, of course, also then means an action, a word, a deed. It has many other meanings, but we'll mostly be thinking about it in terms of action and the certain consequences of acts done in a former life. Sarvapali Radhakrishnan defines it as the principle of karma reckons with the material or the context in which each individual is born. While it regards the past as determined, it allows that the future is only conditioned. The spiritual element in man allows him freedom within the limits of his nature. Man is not a mere mechanism of instincts. The spirit in him can triumph over the automatic forces that try to enslave him. And there are traditionally thought to be three kinds of karma. Sanchita karma, which is accumulated, the karma we have gathered over many lifetimes. Prarabdha karma, the karma that is currently ripe, that has literally already begun. And then kriyamana karma, this is future karma. This is what is being made right now. And there's this idea that kriyamana karma is the karma that we actually can change and that we sort of have some control over. There's a classical illustration of this. We get an image of somebody shooting an arrow, and if you imagine a bag of arrows on his back, his or her back, the bag of arrows is the sanchita, the accumulated karma. The arrow, this particular arrow, is the prarabdha karma, which has been chosen, but we get some choice over where we aim the bow, how we aim the bow, and over the actual movement of the arrow. Radhakrishnan continues, the Bhagavad Gita asks us to raise the self by the self. We can use the material with which we are endowed to promote our ideals. The cards in the game of life are given to us. We do not select them. They are traced to our past karma, but we can call as we please, lead what suit we will, and as we play, we gain or lose. And there is freedom. And so again, speaking to this idea of freedom, but we're really talking about individual karma here. I had a student ask me in the fall about collective karma, and I kind of became interested in this idea about what has been said by the tradition about collective karma. And it turns out not that much specifically until pretty recently. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about it. He says, in terms of the universe, Buddhism maintains that the world is a communal creation of the karma of living beings. Those living beings who share the same karma also live together in a world of mutual retribution. That is the common karma for all those beings called collective karma. And it's a bit easier to maybe think about collective karma in Buddhism because Buddhism sort of embraces this doctrine of no self, an atmavada, and if there isn't a self, it's a little bit easier to see maybe how there's this sort of collectivity. The Buddha said, there's no being found here within oneself, only a heap of karmic constituents. Just as the word chariot is used when we come across a combination of parts, so we speak conventionally of a human being when the 5 aggregates are present. And so the way that karma gets passed on in Buddhism is through this sort of process self rather than an individual self, this idea that you can sort of light one candle flame from another, and there's this causal connection, which again sort of gives rise to this sort of bigger idea of connectivity. The Buddha said about karma, "It is will, O monks, that I call karma. For having willed, one acts through body, speech, or mind." He then connects this to morality. Refrain from doing evil deeds, perfect good deeds, and purify the mind. That is the teaching of the Buddha. Once one's morality is perfected, one's mind then seeks nothing else than the perfection of nirvana, the state of utter peace. Such is the blessed fruit of morality. So let the wise person know it well, this root of all the branches of perfection. And there's this image in Buddhism of the jewel net of Indra, this idea of all these beads that are little droplets that are interconnected, and this idea that we all have this sort of interconnected essences. And so I'm interested in this mostly in how it comes into yoga philosophy, which is what I work on. And this happens through the Brahma Viharas, Maitri, loving kindness, Karuna, compassion, Mudita, joy, and Upeksha, equanimity. And this comes into Yoga Sutra 133, where we have this idea of from the cultivation of Maitri, friendship towards the Sukha, the happy, Karuna, compassion towards the Dukkha, the suffering, Mudita, joy towards the Punya, the virtuous, and Upeksha, indifference or equanimity towards the Apunya, towards the non-virtuous. And so through these practices, there is chitta prasadanam, there is this clarity of mind. And this got me thinking, maybe rather than thinking about collective karma, what is our reciprocal karma? Arvind Sharma writes about this, and he says, how do we distinguish between old and new karma, and between one's own and another's karma? A simple illustration should suffice. Suppose A performs an act of charity towards B. Now, did A perform it under the influence of his past karma, or is it new karma? And did A perform it under the influence of B's past karma or present karma? How has all this worked out? Is there a celestial supercomputer or what? In other words, how is my past karma, how has it led me to be here speaking to you? And how may that affect your present and your future karma, and the ways that we all influence each other all the time. In Yoga Sutra 416, it's explained that this is actually a realist point of view. An object is not dependent upon one's mind, for if it were, when it is not cognized by that mind, then what would it be? In other words, this is the idea of if a tree falls in the forest, right, and nobody hears it, is it still happening? And this is really the idea that, it is a realist point of view, and we are co-creating a shared reality. And so our relationships with each other are important. We're told in Yoga Sutra 4.7 that the karma of a yogi is not white or black, but for others, there are three kinds. The Patanjali Yoga Shastra, the commentary on the Yoga Sutra attributed to Vyasa, explains this fourfold nature of karma. There's black karma, which is considered to be evil-natured. White karma, I'm skipping down here, I'll come back here in a minute, which is dependent on the mind alone. This comes through yoga practices from tapas, austerity, svadhyaya, self-study, dhyana, meditation. And then the yogi's karma is neither white nor black. This belongs to renunciants whose kleshas, afflictions, have been diminished, yogis in their final body. It's not white because they've renounced the fruits of their actions. It's also not black because they don't engage in bad actions. But what I'm really interested in is this sort of white and black karma, which I think is where most of us are existing. And this is produced by external practices. And this is created through showing kindness or hurting others. In other words, it's created through our reciprocal karma and our interactions with others in the world. Here's an image from Hilma af Klint of the swan, just to sort of show, again, a kind of visual for maybe how our karmas kind of interact with each other. And to sort of look at maybe a practical way of dealing with this, Yoga Sutra 233 suggests vitarka bhadane pratipaksha bhavanam. When there is obstruction by negative impulses, one should contemplate the opposite. Yoga Sutra 234 says negative impulses, himsa, violence, and so forth, are either acted upon by oneself or caused or permitted to be done by others. In other words, again, this is about our interactions with others. This is where we get ahimsa, the first yama of nonviolence. These are preceded by greed, anger, or delusion in a mild, intermediate, or intense manner. And because these produce the infinite fruits of suffering and ignorance, one should contemplate the opposite, pratipaksha bhavanam. The Patanjali Yoga Shastra on 233 explains, one should contemplate while being cooked in the frightful hot coals of samsara, of cyclic existence, I have taken refuge in the yoga dharma, in the practice of yoga, by giving protection to all living beings. Again, this is connecting us to others through the practice of yoga. And this doesn't just appear in the Yoga Sutra. I have not very much time today, but just to show you another example, this comes into the Bhagavad Gita as well. Just as those who are unwise act attached to action, attached to karma, O Bharata, so the wise should act unattached, asakta, why desiring to hold together the world, loka sangraha. Again, it's about our interactions with others and our reciprocal or collective karma. Arvind Sharma speaks of this now from a more Advaitic position. He says, the Advaitic position, both traditional represented by Shankara and modern as represented by Ramana, is in agreement that, first of all, a basic morality is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for obtaining release. And second of all, although both good and evil deeds constitute bondage, evil deeds have to be often overcome by good deeds, as they represent a far greater entanglement in the not-self, because of the greater measure of egocentricity and consequently greater measure of alienation they imply from dualistic consciousness. In other words, morality is important, and the way that we treat others are important in terms of our own karma. Krishnan says on this, but the existence of a karmic design pattern embracing the karmas of a number of individuals does not establish the concept of karma accumulating and ripening collectively. It only posits their congruence at a particular point of time. To illustrate, A commits the murder of B. A is doing kriyamana of agami karma, of which he will have to bear the consequences in due course. It is embryonic karma that will mature at a future date. But so far as B is concerned, his murder is the result of his prarabdha karma, past karma which has become operative and which is exhausted by the event. Kriyamana karma is a potential which will bear fruit in subsequent life or lives. Prarabdha karma is that which is maturing to bear fruit presently. This is, of course, a negative example, but the same thing is true with the positive. If we do something positive in the world, it will affect other people's future karma, and it may have been caused by our past karma. Another image just to show you, I kind of imagine that we all are sort of these little bubbles floating around, as Kandinsky has it, sort of colliding with each other. And so our karmas intersect in some way. And, you know, some people have bigger circles of karma that's kind of radiating out than others. Bhikkhu Char in this lovely little manual called Kama talks about this. He says, imagine Kama as a stream of water, or rather of many colored waters, running in currents alongside one another in the main bed of the stream, and continually imparting some of their own coloring to the neighboring currents, and from these neighboring currents, receiving in return some coloring that changes their own character. I found a wonderful image of this river in Colombia that has these 5 different colors, and you can see these streams sort of running into each other and influencing each other. Bhikkhu Silachara continues, the little thread of karma which we call ours is thus not exclusively ours. How can it be, when in ultimate truth and fact there is no us? But in its course through the fabric of our national and our world karma imparts something of its coloring to its neighbor threads. And if its colors are strong and full, even to many threads far removed from it in the fabric. The many living threads of the so-called individual's karma twine and intertwine with other threads and change the course and coloring of these threads for good or ill, according as our own particular thread is a good or ill one. Again, in other words, our threads are interwoven, and through doing things like participating in this conference, we all have the opportunity to influence each other. And so, as I promised, I want to end up with the image I started with, this illustration of Yoga Sutra 434, which really shows all of our individual threads kind of coming together to create this collective and reciprocal karma. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I would like to extend my appreciation to all the participants for the valuable inputs, thought-provoking session, and active engagement. Your contributions have made this session productive and meaningful. Now, I would like to invite Professor Sanjay Verma to share his closing remarks. Thank you all for all your active participation.
Thank you, Chandni. Are you getting my voice?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Thank you, thank you. So, I would like to thank every paper presenter that it's quite early morning in India and late evening or maybe night in other parts of the world. So, thank you everyone for being here. One of the key themes of this conference is reclaiming our Bharatiya knowledge traditions, and this is a crucial step in restoring our identity and revitalizing cultural pride, I can say, an endeavor that has been central to all initiatives led by the government of India since 2020. This particular conference also aims not only to reclaim and revisit indigenous ways of living rooted in the Bharatiya ethos, but also to reimagine them in the contemporary context, bridging the gap between ancient wisdom and its modern day applications. So, coming on to this particular session, as in the other sessions also, of this conference, the presentations reflect varied epistemological and performative aspects of the Bharati way of life that I can say. To begin with, the first presenter, Dr. Anne Hardgroves, her paper seeks to examine the reception of the Karma Sutra in the West, focusing on its translation, censorship, and the role of scholars in its global dissemination. So thank you, Dr. Anne Hardgrove, for your insightful presentation, tracing Archer's historico-political role in publishing the text, but also his involvement in colonial violence. Uh, we can say those present here, we all can appreciate you for providing a holistic picture rather than trying to cover up the negative aspects of his time of India. And you have taken the book of Vātsyāyana, the Kam Sutra. So thank you very much for your insightful presentation. The next presentation was by Miss Anna D. Angelo from Argentina, where she explores how yoga in Argentina has has been reinterpreted through local spirituality, therapy, and women's well-being within a global context. So, again, I would like to thank you for your informative presentation on how yoga and its practices influence both locally and globally, especially in Argentina. I also found your explanation of how yoga initiatives both the mind and body and its spiritual, therapeutic, and positive energy-based effects. It's very interesting. It sounds very well. The next presenter is Mr. Yatan Sharma from, I hope, from New York, as Chandani told us. So his topic was revitalizing self-reliance in the era of globalization. Uh, this paper focuses on socio-political and economic aspects of India's self-reliant stance in the contemporary context, highlighting both its numerous advantages and proven benefits, but also some of the challenges that we must conquer in order to further expand this way of being in the global context. However, as we focus on the present and future of Viksit Bharat that he used this term, it is also important to reflect on our rich and historic concept of Swa and Swadhinata, which have guided our nation from the very beginning and continue to inspire our efforts towards an Atmanirbhar Bharat under the leadership of the current Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi. So, and you have taken five philosophers for the political ideas for Atmanirbhar Bharat. So you can also, I would like to suggest that you can also take Rajgopalachari and few others for the current understanding of the Indian political thought. Then Professor Mariana Barruco, your performance-based presentation infused with poetic charm, as I found, as you navigate your cultural heritage, was a very beautiful variation from the discussions we have had as part of the session today. I would like to thank you for inviting us to witness your personal journey of identity formation and understanding in the multi-rooted diasporic milieu. Thank you very much for this presentation. Then we have Mr. Matheus Landau de Carvalho. So I found you had done a lot of research in your paper and in your presentation as well. So your well-researched and a thorough academic exploration of the Indian equivalent of nature in the Ramayana was truly fascinating. Valmiki's Ramayana has always been and continues to be a foundational text in Bharati existence, offering its vast universe of wisdom across both space and time. I can say it is incredibly delightful to hear another perspective on the context of nature within this timeless text. Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. And the last, Professor Joe Slatoff has presented a very beautiful paper, very insightful, rather, I can say that your textual and pictorial discussions of the individual and collective karma and harnessing its potential for universal harmony was indeed thought-provoking. The focus on the aspects of yoga philosophy which embody this positive coexistence and co-creation of the world that we live in, no doubt has expensive and lasting effects in the field of interhuman relationships at the individual and collective level. So thank you, Professor Joe Slatoff, for this presentation. And This session was very wonderful in terms of the knowledge that all the six presenters have thrown the light on Bharatiya knowledge system and its tradition. Definitely, the listeners must have got a new perspective, new ways of research and thoughts on Indian, I can say, Bharati knowledge tradition. So, Chandni, do we have time for question answer session?
We are running out of time, sir.
Okay.
Still, we
So,
can have two, three questions.
so just as Chani is telling us that we are running out of time, so if there are any questions from any presenter, you are welcome. Just two or three questions. Anyone?
So, hi, I have a question. This is Anne Hardgrove.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
have a
ma'am.
question for Anna, if she's still there. I was so fascinated by the yoga sort of lifestyle that you were presenting about in Argentina, and I couldn't help but I was really struck by a comment on your slide about how there's a whole sort of consumption element to it, with the store display, with the yoga, sort of the model posing doing yoga, and what sort of struck me is I sort of wondered how if some of it is sort of being filtered through a sort of North American sort of adoption of yoga. Um, and I was also curious, like like I've done yoga in the United States, and I remember my first yoga teacher, she had learned yoga before like Indians were allowed to immigrate to the United States, and I wasn't so sure about the Argentinian immigration history, sort of how Indians fit into that. But I was really I found it all very fascinating, especially the pictures of people. I mean, it looked like a very sort of upscale endeavor. Um, so I was just really interested, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. I don't know if I have to answer.
Yes, if you can. Yes.
Yes, just maybe I didn't mention that Indian immigration in Argentina was very scarce, very little, um, and it was in fact through the United States in some cases, or directly from Europe, that the first teachers or masters became to Argentina. But what it is for the global goods and products and that you mentioned first, the consumption culture, well, it is obviously a more recent process of globalization. But my idea is that, following other scholars, that economical and technological globalization is homogenizing, but cultural globalization is more diffuse or uh, bilateral or parallel. Thank you for your comments. And
Yes. Any other question?
Good morning to everyone. I'm Devashri. I have a question addressed to Miss Zoe and her discussion on the different ideas of karma. I just wanted to ask you that you put forth several theories of karma and illustrated them in the form of intersecting circles or rainbow colored rivers that run next to each other, or even in terms of the interwoven thread analogy. How do you view karma based on your understanding and your study of it and the different natures and aspects of it?
Thank you. That is a that is a big question. I guess I'm trying to figure out how I view it based on, looking at reading different texts and sort of looking at intersecting descriptions. But I guess what I'm interested in is, there's so many descriptions of how individual karma works, and 15 minutes is so short that there's so many more things that I that I could say, but didn't have time to say. But there's this idea in the commentary on the Yoga Sutra. There's also a long discussion on how multiple karmas come together to create new karma, and different ideas of how they intersect. So I guess I feel like I'm in the new stages of thinking about this, or in the intermediate stages maybe. But that I'm just interested in how, different people's karmas intersect. And so I think, we do influence each other all the time, and perhaps we are, affecting our future karma. And so I guess that's how I see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, Chandni, go ahead for vote of thanks.
May I have a comment here, Professor?
Yeah, sure.
Because during the Zoe Zlatov's presentation, a Sanskrit word came to my mind, and I expected a bit for this word to pop up, which is I love this word, which is pratitya samutpada. So could you talk a bit about this conception from Sanskrit language? I think it's precious for your presentation. Could we listen a bit regarding your current presentation?
Yes, and it's certainly, like I said, 15 minutes is so short that it's certainly something that I've thought about and written about. But yeah, this idea in Buddhism of, these sort of intersecting dependent arising, right? That it's usually how it's translated into English. And again, I was sort of trying to illustrate that with the candle flame that's sort of being passed on, and this way of sort of watching karma being passed on, and then also the sort of Indra's net, where you see this interconnection that happens, and this idea that if we are all actually empty of a self, then there's this sort of dependent origination and way of coming into being that is all interconnected. And so I guess what I'm interested in is that even, in other theories, I mostly work on yoga philosophy, but even when and Advaita, and so even when there is a conception of the self, there's still this kind of sense of interconnectedness. I think just when we think of a self, we think more about individual karma, right? And so it's somehow easier to understand this connectivity, I think, from this idea of pratitya samutpada. So yes, in my paper, I will definitely write more about that. There are many angles to this, but thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Professor Joy.
Actually,
Chandni?
sorry, Mr. Sanjay, because actually 20 minutes are not enough to cover all the points. And in Portuguese, there is a similar translation to what we have it in English. It's originação interdependente, or co-originação interdependente. But thank you, Zoe. Thank you very much. Sorry, Mr. Sanjay.
Thank you.
No problem, no problem. Yes. Yes, Chandni?
As we conclude this session, P5, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Professor Sanjay Verma for chairing the session and for his insightful contributions that have greatly enriched our discussion. So we truly appreciate your time and presence. And I would like to extend my gratitude to the participants also. Thank you for joining us. And your valuable inputs, thought-provoking session, and active engagement, your contributions have made this session productive and meaningful. I'm pleased to announce that e-certificates will be provided for your appreciation as a participant. Thank you so much.
We will have a group photo. Kindly switch on our cameras. Everyone, kindly switch on your camera. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.